All right, call the February 21st, 2023 budget workshop to order. And so we have all the board members except Presley, who's on Zoom with us. Austin Calaman, Robin Davis. Was Andrew going to join us?
I'm not sure. I'm not positive.
I got talked to him, so the mayor is not present, and Mike Hoffman, our legal counsel, is not present. So with that, we'll turn it over. And
Excluding the other.
oh, I'm
cast
sorry.
characters?
And we have Kim, our finance manager, and Sharon here. Thank you.
For everything, manager.
And I was just going to say, and now I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
We'll do count first. It's going to be easier because it's the most probably question oriented. So we have Charlie here too, so he can help kind of loop everybody in when it comes to some of these projects.
I'm sorry.
So what we'll do is we'll start with water and we'll work our way down all the way to admin. So to start out, the lead line replacement, because of what's coming down the line when it comes to the LCR rule in 2024,
Hey,
we know
Austin,
that there's going to be
Austin.
a lot of us going out
Austin.
there and trying to confirm
Can anybody hear me?
services, and so we may come across some. And in that process, we'll have to start replacing them. So we started throwing this in there. That would be from the corp off the main to the curb stop. So we started allocating as a budgetary number when we run across these issues.
Excuse me, is my
Doing more testing, more potholing. So we started throwing numbers in there for about 50,000 a year. It's really a placeholder to kind of see how it progresses. It's going to be new to us. Not to say that we haven't done it in the past, but we're probably not going to be doing it on the scale that we've done currently. So that's the first one. And then we go into, and on this sheet, you can see everything that's in yellow within the water. That's all contained with the water pipe assessment in which GMB and staff's working on. We're doing samples throughout the entire city to see which projects take priority. And so I started throwing some of those projects on here as placeholders for what's going to be coming down the line. So you cannot physically get all of these projects done in the next 5 years. And we've toyed with the idea of actually taking these all off. And then once that project's done in May, the May kind of April timeframe, coming back and doing a budget amendment to account for what projects are going to be recommended through GMB when it comes to that study. It encompasses about 3.385 million if you take everything that's in the highlighted yellow piece. Obviously, we have the Monroe and Railroad project, which was a city project that is now since put on hold. We were piggybacking off of them to do some water and sewer improvements. But we have obviously the Cape Henlopen Drive. That's a huge project. We have Cedar on there. That's a huge project. We have Kings Highway. That's a huge project. And Charlie and I've talked about this because, you know, in these Del Dot centric areas like Kings Highway, originally we were talking about having a focus on
Austin,
press. What's up?
can you hear me on the, can you hear me?
No,
Can you hear us?
he can hear us, but we cannot hear him.
Right.
Kim, may we presume that all of the numbers in red are negative numbers?
No,
The-
not for this. I highlighted them myself just because they're included in that.
They're all going to be expenses.
Yeah, they're all expenses.
Okay, so
It's just things that he highlighted as a different color, so they stood out more instead of the black.
that's throughout the list, okay.
Perhaps you were going to say something.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Could someone mute him again?
Could you not hear anything we were saying?
No, I can hear everything.
Okay. So what do you want me to pick up at? So as it relates to the projects in yellow, so we're looking at probably getting something back in that May timeframe. We have some things that we're taking a look at. There's a couple more samples that are going to be taken out of Cape Henlopen Drive. We already have one of the 12. We're going to get 2 of the 8, or at least 1 of the 8. And then we have a couple other ones that we're going to take a look at. One of the things Charlie and I discussed was originally we had Kings being ahead of the Del Dot project, which is the roundabout project. But one of the things we discussed is how that will rank, whether or not we look at doing our project after Del Dot or conjointly with Del Dot. So we're trying to get, creative as we look at these projects. There's a lot of stuff on here. And some of them are probably 3-year projects like Pilottown Road. We obviously have the canal crossing at the bridge. We've discussed this before. We have 3 crossings, 2 at the drawbridge that are pretty much in parallel side by side, plus or minus 20 or 50 feet. But then we have the one down at CH Mason's Way. The closest one to the bridge is the one that we've been having issues with. We've turned it out. We've turned it completely down. We did put a Band-Aid on it, and we put a blow off valve. So if we wanted to bring that up online, we could and test it.
That's totally offline now?
Yes, totally offline. But we're in the midst of, we have a 50-50 matching planning grant, which we've done with almost all these projects where we take advantage of it. It helps with the engineering, the studies that go into it. But what we're doing is we're trying to see the best crossing per se, and that could be from a size standpoint of the pipe. That could be from a location, hydraulic standpoint. So we're continually working on that. And we're doing that kind of conjointly with the water tower because it all fits in.
Austin, for safety reasons, is it that safe to put it off another year? I thought it was fairly urgent.
So we actually put the valving in place to where the lowest fire flow area was actually Anglers, Charlie, and we did all of that. We had Teal do that tie-in work. So we're sitting pretty good, but those 2 canal crossings are relatively the same age, plus or minus like 10 years.
Okay.
So we're mindful of that. The Sussex Drive and DuPont Loop. So this is one that we had in last year. So the school district is doing their project when it comes to both the elementary and the middle school. There's a 6-inch water line that kind of goes behind Sussex Drive or behind DeVries Circle, and then kind of catty corners its way over to DuPont. It's an older line, but there's going to be a piece of it replaced by the school district, not the whole thing. And so we're getting a price to see whether or not we should contribute and replace that whole line all the way to DuPont. We've also discussed eliminating that line altogether and focusing in on areas in the heart of town where we could do, like, for example, from street names. Where's the last one that Wendell lived on?
Johnson
Yes.
or Clark and Johnson?
Nope, the one farther over to the left.
Finger.
Yes, it's not DuPont, Burton. You live on Burton. The Burton where the Mariners Retreat is, that's a dead end line connecting that into Ocean View, and whether or not that provides hydraulic stability, similar to what we have over here. Because once you replace that line, then you have the other piece, which is the access. There's a gas main that runs through that same area. So we want to be mindful of being able to get back there should we run into any issues in the future. So we're kind of counterbalancing, seeing what we get back with as far as cost. And that pretty much from a water perspective sums it up. Now, obviously, everything in yellow is kind of a placeholder, and they may fluctuate. Costs may go to the left, they may go to the right, they may increase, but as you increase costs in certain projects, you're going to be pulling some projects off because they don't rank as high. So I'm going to toy with this a little bit just to see what makes the most sense. And I think as we get closer to March, in the next couple of weeks, I'll probably discuss it with Charlie and see which ones are looking like, without giving away kind of the results, which one looks to be the more favorable as far as project priority. And then obviously that kind of leads into water production. And this is where we're probably going to see the most significant cost.
Well, just,
Go ahead.
one of the things you talked about was taking it out and then adding it in as an amendment. I'm not sure how everyone else feels about that, but that doesn't seem like it's prudent from a budgeting perspective. Because whether it's this project, and that project. We know we have projects that need to get done. And as a placeholder for monies, it seems, I don't know what everyone else's feeling is.
One of the other things to think about is if we do a state project, so if it was a Kings Highway project, if it's Cape and Open Drive, if it's Cedar, my opinion, just knowing we went through on Politown Road and just the length, you're probably talking at least 2 years, possibly 3 years of a project. So Politown Road, for context, was a 3-year project. And it took all but 3 years to get it done. And we went into the summer on year 3. So just knowing that when you start talking in these Del Dot right of ways, it costs more to be there. And it takes longer. And obviously it's you're in the prime season, so you're already cut back by 5 months because you can't really, they frown upon work past May unless there's a benefit or, for example, the Politown Road, we were past New Road. That was the goal, was to get past New Road. And then we were in that area after May 15th. So I have no problem keeping it. Like I said, I may go through and try and tighten the numbers up once we get a little bit more info. If it looks like certain projects are going to take priority. I know we have a couple on Kings that we have samples from, and those are your distribution lines coming in from the well field. And then we have some like that Johnson Painter DuPont. That's an older area of town, which could use some cleaning up. And then, doing some cross ties in so that we have hydraulic flow throughout the entire town. We don't have a bunch of dead ends. And obviously we have the new road to Politown is another one that we've been looking at. It's an old piece from 4th Street on New Road from 4th Street to Politown. It's a pretty dated piece of cast iron that connects into PVC on both sides. And we threw in the Politown Road side streets as well, because that's going to be another one. We have all of those samples from when we did the tie-ins from the Politown Road project and stubbed into each one of the side streets.
But that's $750,000. That's not just the pipe assessment. That's actually the
Yeah.
project.
Yes, yes.
What's the salmon colored?
Well, we didn't get there yet. It's just a
I got
different.
one on the top.
So the Monroe and City is on hold because we don't know what the city's going to approve as far as their capital budget. It was a city project that we were piggybacking off of to do some water and sewer work. So we allocated about $1 million for that. But I don't know. And Charlie said he was talking about having that conversation again to see where it stood. Because the engineering's done, just like Cedar. The Cedar engineering is pretty well done. But then again, when we started doing this pipe assessment study, we don't necessarily know if that's the correct priority list as far as having Cedar go first. And we're also looking at it from a stormwater perspective. And I think the state would be involved in those discussions as well.
So how are you doing this study? I mean, are you sending something through it or?
So we've been taking samples. So we'll actually go and we put a wet tap in and we put a fire hydrant. So we got a coupon from there. We have a couple different projects that we've done where we have coupons or samples. We have pieces of pipe from Lewes Market and the pipe go out of the ground when the fire hydrant was shut at the water tower. So we have a couple handful coupons from contracting work, coupons from stuff we've done, pieces that have just busted because of old age and we've replaced them. So visually, we
Library is
yeah.
over in my office if you ever want to come check it out. But
Just checking to see how you do it. That's all.
in addition to modeling it, we learned a lot.
What,
last week about, like,
have there-
dirty water situations, so we're able to model like certain things to see where dirty water is moving, that'll influence the decision. We already know the pipe ages and pipe types of pretty much every pipe, so we know what if it's cast iron, ductile iron, PVC, things of that nature. So all of those things will work into the indexing and the recommendation that we will make, like Austin said.
Have we had many complaints about water quality over there or any issues with that pipe, with all those pipes over there?
No, I mean, what's interesting is what we're trying to do is track, because obviously we're doing, and we talked to SPI about this, and it was a great meeting with those folks. Whenever we open a hydrant for a flow test, seeing where that rusty water, discolored water tends to go, and we have a general area of a couple pockets within the city that it does go. But SPI is unique because they run a constant flow, but some of their processes ramp up to where they could potentially double what their normal flow is. And they already let us know that when they do that, they start to see a little bit of discoloration, but it's not crazy. They definitely can tell it when we run the flow test. So I think what we're trying to do is track as much as what we can. And I think we're going to start systematically doing the flow test as being like the second Wednesday of the month or whatever it may be, so that we can, it's going to be this day. You turn your flow
Yeah.
test on the day after we do them, you got to wait 29 days or 30 days, but it allows SPI to kind of plan accordingly. It allows our customers to know that, second Tuesday of the month or second Wednesday. It's kind of like street sweeping.
Yeah. We haven't noticed any water quality problems, and even when you flush the hydrants, it's not much that comes out. It's reasonable amount. So I don't see personally any major things, and no one's mentioned to me on that side of the canal that there's problem with quality.
Yeah, we haven't really seen anything on that side of town. We have a couple pockets in town that we still see it, and some of the pockets are even PVC, which is even more interesting. So we're working through that, and I'd be interested to see how the final outcome is as far as priority.
And SPI was very, very upfront.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're going to be sharing the data, the logs with us, but they've had some real horrendous perturbations, and they lose their production. They have to flush the systems. They go through all their filters. It really is incurring a lot of cost to them. So it behooves both of us for them to share their data with us and for us to look at, because it's not just locally. They're seeing perturbations that are being caused on this side of town.
They are really our top, one of our key accounts when it comes to water production and in general. I mean, they're doing in the winter season, they're about 50% of the demand on the system, and in the summer season, they're about 25% of the demand.
There's your water count.
What did they say? Their flow is 160 million gallons a year.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot of water they use.
it's a constant too. So they shut down about once a year, and it's usually the October timeframe. But it really is a magnificent facility, and those folks were great. They helped us help them, is what we tend to think. But
the other is it is the only production facility in the United States, and it's one of a handful in the world, and they supply between 50 and 90% of the market for antacids and such. So they're not going away. They're doing improvements. They're investing in the facility.
so that kind of rounds out water as a whole, and then we move to water production. And we've discussed. Go ahead.
How about lead? Any issues there?
Well, so we're doing that top line. We put a placeholder in there, similar to what we do for manhole lining or stormwater replacement. So we have a lead service line replacement. What I foresee happening is, as we start gathering data when it comes to services, both our side and the customer side, the ones that we don't have, we're going to start seeing some of those services pop up.
Right.
And so without having too much data of how that's going to look, because we're comparing it to our old LCR, which every 3 years we're doing our normal samples, which is between 10 and 20 samples. We're going to probably be out there more often and sampling as much as what we can, or using predictive modeling like 120 water. So we'll be able to get a handle of where those areas are, and then either have a capital project be made of it, or flip side, use basically an individual service replaced here or there. One of the things that that Charlie and I talked about too is we've had some pretty big projects through the years when it came to water, and this year it's not, as you can see just on the front of 23, 24, we don't really have too much. But one of the things that we've discussed is there's a lot of money out there for lead and copper, and with how we're moving with 120 water, we're gonna start capturing those areas or those pockets that potentially could have lead, whether it be a gooseneck or on a service side. What I had mentioned, Charlie, and we started brainstorming is, could that potentially end up leading to a different capital project, which then would have some sort of subsidy of some sort through the BIL or through SRF funds to assist in the service lines, maybe not on the main side, but at least help with all your service lines that lead, that lead from the main out. So I think this year is going to be a lot of information gathering, which leads to a more robust and tighter capital projects in year 2, 3, 4, and so on.
How about cost? How about costs associated with the cross connection work?
Robin, there's really going to be no cost.
No, it's basically no cost to us except for what we're paying HydroCorp.
And our internal,
Well-
tracking of it.
Well, what are we paying them and how much track? It seems to me it's gonna be a lot of tracking. Isn't that
They're
gonna be?
handling all the tracking.
HydroCorp's assisting in the tracking. I forget what the annual, I think it's $1,400 a year for HydroCorp.
I don't think it's that much.
But was that, I saw that number. I think you discussed it with us, but I didn't think that was everything. I thought that was just the initial costs and that we didn't have the cost for the ongoing.
We don't. So the customer is responsible for the ongoing inspection costs. Now, beyond that, beyond our agreement with HydroCorp, whether or not that agreement started, I think in 2020 or 21, Bill is going to be at our meeting tomorrow, and
Uh-huh.
he's going to talk about the cost. He's going to talk about the program and what they're going to do versus what we're going to do. So we may get a little bit more insight tomorrow on that.
I think we're going to get a lot of pushback. It's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. I'm just worried about the administrative cost of covering all that because you can turn that over to them. It's going to end up in your pocket at your house at some point. So I was just thinking there is some cost associated with that, and we should be aware of it.
And the tough part is that they're not, this isn't a Board of Public Works thing. Rehoboth's going through it, Milford's going through it. It's a requirement that you have to meet by 2023. 4? Is it 3? 4? Yeah. So it's being pushed through the EPA, just like lead and copper is.
Maybe Rehoboth could tell us what the costs are for managing it.
They don't know yet
They don't know
either.
I thought it was started over there. Haven't they started? Aren't they ahead of us?
They've started doing they've had Harry Caswell do some inspections of their commercial buildings. But all the residentials that are required to do, I think they're gonna do internally with staff.
But they're paying Harry, I would assume, right? Or is that all covered?
That's all covered as part of the program.
Okay.
All that's gotta be done by the building owner, property owner.
Okay. All right, I was just thinking about that and I thought there's gonna be some administrative time that we're maybe not counting. It
Yeah.
doesn't sound like a lot. Okay.
Well, we'll see. I mean, obviously, it's going to be a learning experience for us, just like lead and copper. That number could double, it could triple. We don't know until we dive into it. And we may be utilizing some subcontractor, Harry Caswell, wherever, to help us with that.
Yeah. Down here in Florida, I see the cross connection systems like every house. It's just above ground so you can see it.
So that really, any other questions when it comes to water?
For the well. 300.
I didn't get there yet.
Well, you said water, so.
No. Here, I'll do water production, so I'll get into it. So at this meeting, tomorrow, GMB is going to have a discussion with us about the water tower, the sizing, the modeling that they've done, the aesthetics of it, because we have to decide, one, not only the size, but two, the type. And there's a couple different types, and I'm going to leave that up to you guys whether or not which one you'd go with. Each one has a different cost associated with it. But needless to say, we've discussed the water tower project, from 2004. Was it on the 2004 study or the 2002 study? We've always had it in there to put a larger tower up for fire capacity and obviously reserve capacity of our system. And so we've grown over the ages, and so we've worked towards making that decision and whether or not it should be 750 or $1 million. But with that project, we've had a deeper discussion on replacing the entire common header. And the common header is the pipe where every well feeds into. And it would be replacement of the common header and all the piping that goes into the well itself. So obviously, we're putting a lot of money into refurbishing our wells. Well 1 just got done. Well 2, we're getting ready to do that probably in the May timeframe. We're going to put new pumps on them. And then we're going to start looking
Is
at
that the rebuild number, the 150,000?
yes, rebuild number. And that includes like the well itself and the pump. So we're going to look and the purpose of this is that pipe, the common header pipe is a mixture of 16, 12, 10, 12, 14, all different varieties of pipe. It's like a Heinz 57. So we're going to look at replacing that along with the water tower as one whole project. And that really cleans up everything down at the well field. And then we focus on the wells themselves. And from a production standpoint, it really buttons everything up. We also
Replacing the water. Are we gonna take this other tank down?
no, you'd be adding one. I said replace. I apologize. So we're going to keep that existing one up in the air. That one, from what Charlie has said, will outlive all of us in this room, including myself. So
That hurt a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah,
They had to put that in there, didn't they?
Yeah.
In other words, faster.
He softened it.
The other thing that we're going to talk about is security fencing. Not only we're going to talk security in general as an overarching discussion, but at the treatment facility itself, Josh had reached out with the school district to see the responsibility of the fence that borders the school district. But we've talked about replacing that and also tightening up once the tower goes in. Obviously, we're going to put a fence around the tower, but continuing that fence to really kind of section off that area with the state of the country and where we're headed and the things that are happening from a terroristic standpoint, the threats that are made. And then we also talked from a redundancy standpoint, an additional treatment building, and we've discussed this with additional well site and additional treatment building. You know, we've had multiple discussions with DENREC, and they were like, whoever picked this site for the wells deserves to be sitting next to Bill Gates, or who should have won the $2 billion out in California. We have discussed putting an additional well at that site because of how good it is. The problem that you run into is our existing wells are about 150 feet and they're tied into 2 different aquifers. You cannot do that per the standards that exist today. So if you line them, you can continue that practice, but if you drill a new well, you cannot continue that practice.
What would be the practice you would have to do then?
You would have to drill a single well and tap into one aquifer. So it'd either be a shallower, which would probably be in the 75 to 100, or you go down into about 125, 150 feet.
You gotta
or
pick
beyond.
one, you can't do both.
Yes, but we talked about it. Yeah, we talked.
but the ones we have now are grandfathered.
Yeah, the ones we have now are grandfathered. That's why we lined them. And we still really, from a production standpoint, we got nearly the same production, maybe a 10% hit, 15%.
Do we know which one's better, just from a quality perspective, or are they the same?
They're about the same when it comes to quality. Production wise, you're getting a lot more out of farther away, like towards the Savannah roadside. So 4 and 5 are our big boys. They're a 16-inch casing, putting out anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 GPM. But that ties into the common header discussion, because we were starting to see some pressure issues at pressure issues in the header on the influence side. And we started to talk about whether or not the condition of that pipe has anything to do with it being 60, 70, 80 years old. Does it make sense to upsize that pipe going into the treatment building? Because those wells themselves, I mean, you're talking 1,200, 1,000. There's head pressure loss just due to distance, but they're a good production well. I mean, we get them tested. We had DENREC came in, they did their PFAS testing last spring or last September, actually. Everything checked out from a sanitary survey standpoint, everything checks out. So we talked about adding a 6th well and also discussed looking at the potential of a redundancy when it comes to a water treatment facility. That plant, the difficulty with that plant is how it's set up. You need tower. You need space in a tower or elevated storage to give you time to do any sort of modifications within that facility. But having a redundant facility allows you to kind of back and forth. It's that N-1 scenario. So we have allocations in there for that. I think as we start talking about 6 well and also a redundant treatment facility, I think we'll start to handle, a more in-depth discussion of what those costs are gonna
How
look
much
like.
water does the wastewater treatment plant take? None, I assume, right? It's all, there's no water, we're putting into it. It's all just sewage, right?
Yeah, well,
No, there's water for,
Material anyway, or.
not that much.
yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
cleaning the filters.
Keeping them wet, and then whatever they use down there for,
So drilling the 6th well.
Yeah.
That takes away having access to 2 aquifers.
yes, the new practices, you cannot drill and tap into 2 different aquifers.
So.
But you already have 2 different aquifers and you drill into one, I assume?
Yes, yeah, I'm saying,
You can pick any one. you
yes, you can.
And remember, we did a contract with the state to do an aquifer study. Because our study was quite old, to determine the level of aquifers, not only from us, but from Rehoboth, Tidewater, and everyone else that's tapping into it. To make sure that the aquifer is not being depleted or is suitable.
So I'm still confused. If drilling a 6th well, no other restrictions, means you now have to have all of your wells.
No,
Not all of them.
Okay,
Just the-
that's where I'm.
Yeah, just the well that's being drilled. You can only be in the uppermost aquifer, the southernmost aquifer, you can go even deep.
And that's
You
where
can
all the-
be in the same aquifer as the rest of the wells, but you cannot be in 2 at the same time with that single well.
Okay.
So the way it exists
Okay.
today is they have a 75-foot screen. And so now you have the ability to draw from 2 different aquifers at the same time. In the future, you can only draw from one if you drill a new well.
Okay, now I understand.
Any other questions on water production?
Thank you for being precise.
What's the hurricane specifications for water tower? Just curious.
They're all
Category,
built to 125-mile-an-hour standard now.
is that the right number or?
Yeah. Everything we're planning around is in level 3 hurricane, which is 1 mile per hour.
What's the difference in cost between, I don't know, it's a silly question, between a 3 to 4?
I'd have to ask them. They can-
But actually, the latest forecast that have come out have said that the mid-Atlantic region, the probability of ever getting anything more than a category 3. Now, you're gonna get more of them, but the probability of getting more than a category 3 is very, very low. Because of the currents, the shore and everything else. So the category 3 seems to be staying with the building codes and everything else for this region. Because in the front of the building codes, they're on maps. And
When you built your house, did you go above the building code?
I built my house to category 3, and that's not required. of me.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, but that was only because I didn't want to climb a ladder up 30 feet to put it on.
You're better than that. Come. Okay, thanks.
We'll look into it. Earl.
I just would be curious.
Yeah, well, it'll factor into the tank structural integrity, but also the foundation integrity.
You have
So-
a choice of how high off the ground it has to be or can be.
Well, that's due to head height.
It would. We will finalize that part of the design once we know what the size and the style. It will be roughly the same elevation as your existing tank, because you're gonna want to use them in tandem, not put one out of service if the water gets too high in one tank and not in the other. So it'll be roughly 150.
And you can't lower it.
120 feet.
You can't lower it because you didn't have enough static head height to keep pressure in the system.
If we put your face on it.
You're gonna have to pay more for that.
That's extra.
But we could pay pot shots at it.
But you will have to figure out what you want to put on it.
I'm guessing keeping it nice.
All right, so moving on to sewer, and to round out water, we had vehicles based off depreciation, 10 years for half tons. 3/4 tons were right around 10 years. We basically try and keep our equipment as up to snuff as possible whenever we can. It's the same thing with sewer. So if we have a water vehicle, we tie it with a sewer vehicle, just because we split it between the two.
Just to go back up to security fence, because obviously this has become heightened, as you pointed out. And we have no security fence on one side.
Correct.
So, you know, the fence we do have is kind of, I mean, it keeps vehicles out, but that's about it. And is it prudent to wait? Given everything that's coming out right now?
My take is pay for it now, do it.
Well, and it's in the budget, so once we approve it, we can move forward with trying to get quotes, but obviously we're gonna be putting it in when we put the water tower in. And whether or not we want to conjointly do it as part of that project or do it first. And then.
Is there any money coming available for security? That's getting to be a hotter topic and an important topic. Do you see any money coming available from the state or federal agencies?
We're working through that. We're hopeful. So Kim and I met with the University of Delaware, and we're working on the possibility of funding for a couple different projects from a resiliency standpoint. We're starting with resiliency, but there's a chance we'll work towards security, cybersecurity, et cetera. So there is, and we think we have a good possibility of getting something.
Through the university or from the
So
state?
they're assisting with the grant writing piece. So they're actually going to write the grant for us, and then we would receive that money.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the secondary part of it is, besides ensuring we have security fencing, like out at the well field, but in other areas that we needed, we really don't have security cameras around the critical facilities. Oh, is it?
Oh yeah, we're in it.
I'm sorry, I missed.
We didn't get that.
All right,
But what about cybersecurity?
I'll stop bringing that stuff up.
aspect
We're-
for the water?
We're in there. It's in there. So for sewer, obviously, we're looking at teaming up whenever we do one of our water projects. If we're opening up the road, we're gonna take a look at both. What we typically do when we take a look at some of these projects like the Monroe, we go out there and camera everything ahead of time. So we'll actually camera the existing. Sometimes it's terracotta. If it's terracotta and it's good shape and it can be lined, we'll line it. And we'll use a CIPP liner, which is like a little concrete liner that you run through it. It works. It's had success, but you know, there's some certain times where we'll do completely new PVC. By way of an example, we did PVC for the Savannah Road Sewer Extension project, which is tying into Savannah Place for Donovan Smith to come online and so forth.
What's the life expectancy of the line pipes? I would assume it's pretty good, but I don't know.
Charlie, what's
Endless, yeah. Endless, I mean, it's plastic on the inside, so.
So it's just as good as anything else. Good.
So we have that for obviously the Kings Highway project. We're gonna plan that around DelDOT. As part of a franchisee, we're gonna make sure that we make it known that if they have to move the utility lines for their project, that they have some contribution to that work. Obviously, the other piece or the other project we've discussed many a times is the DeVries Circle sewer upsizing. There's a sewer line that runs through the back of Richard Bryan's property and then connects in at DeVries Circle. So that was the other project that we're talking about doing, which is just upsizing the sewer in that area.
Would that take care of the connections into the pipes that keep on seemingly failing?
It's a good question. And you know, the one thing, pipes that keep on failing.
Well, there, many times when I walk the dog over there, you can see, and I've even called a couple of times where there's
No,
on the road
No.
where it's kind of bubbling up.
no, all that's stiffeners in the services.
So this wouldn't do that.
No, that's a sewer, that's water. But I didn't know if if there was a possibility to not actually take the sewer back that way and to continue it down Kings. Rightfully that we have to go across the path, but whether or not it made sense, because at this point in time, I know when it was done, I think it was because of the railroad at that time.
What path, the bicycle path?
Because it veers off, goes behind the station at Kings. And instead, if you could continue it down Savannah Road, as
I think it would factor two things. One, what would be the downstream effects of
Yeah.
adding all that sewer into a different set of pipes?
yeah,
But secondly, what would be the cost of relocating it from where it is now and tying into probably right at the debris circle entrance?
Yeah.
What would that cost be? I mean, that could probably be integrated into the water project on Kings Highway if you wanted to go that way, but I don't have a sense of
Yeah.
what the cost would be and what the downstream effects would be. But we do have the model to be able to do that. Like, we've done it all the time with developments. If you stick this many homes into a development, you're going to affect this pump station and the size of this pipe downstream. Therefore, you're responsible for paying it. We'll have to check that on.
just a thought to get it out.
We used to have grease problems right around the Brian's house. I don't know how much that happening. I haven't heard about that as much. Because there was like a tight turn there and the grease would build up inside one of those manholes. And that was a big problem for a while.
It's every now and then they still run into the issue, but they've been staying on top of the grease inspections as
Okay.
much as what they can. So it's helped, because that's everything coming down from Savannah or from Kings Highway. So I, like I
Where's the
said,
grease, where's the grease coming from? The diner and that area up there?
I think it's coming from like that Big Oyster and Hing Wangs and Mr. P's area. And obviously the station at Kings, but I don't know how. I think they're tied on before it goes back there.
Do we inspect the grease traps at all?
Yes,
Who-
we have
who
to
does
do
it?
inspections. Yep.
How often is that done? I mean, if we're getting a lot of grease, and they're
I
the
prep,
cause
it's
of it.
it's been a while. So as long as we stay on top grease inspections, it's been pretty good. And they do them, I think they do them biannually.
Okay, well,
So I say it used to be a problem, but I haven't heard about it for
Yeah.
years.
okay. Yeah, I mean, if they're causing the problem, they should fix the problem. So it shouldn't be up to us to fix it. So if we keep on top of them, hopefully you can pretty much do away with that.
Yeah. So we're working through that one. Lift station upgrades, we've discussed this. We're working towards receiving funds from Lewes for 900,000 to put towards lift stations. And then Kim and I are working with the University of Delaware to go after some resiliency grants to potentially do some floodgates, some generators at our key locations, some bypass valving should we qualify for it. So we're working through that, and we think along with the University of Delaware, we can qualify for something. But we're working towards that. We talked about actually moving some like pump station 5 down there in California, how all of the electronics are down in that wet well in that junction box. We talked about moving that out and then going towards the mitigation standards and putting the panel outside up elevated. All of that, we're trying to see if we can throw that into a discussion with university and see if we can get some money through FEMA or through DEMA. So it's looking good. There's about $1 million left. So we're gonna,
Ira.
What's the latest on the 900,000? Is that in the coffers at this point?
we're working through it. We're working towards a solution. I think we're close.
Any help you guys need, or you?
Nope, I think I sent it off Friday for another review by their
It
side.
was some fine wordsmithing and
Is there an over under bet on this? Or-
No, I'm feeling good.
Okay, I take the over. Well,
I did include it in the coming fiscal year,
Yeah.
not this current fiscal year. If that,
serious? Yeah.
wow, okay, that's good.
I didn't know if that was a good wow or a bad
Yeah.
wow.
I'd-
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then and like I said, we keep like sewer manhole lining. We've had a couple manufacturers that have expressed interest in doing kind of a pilot project, but whenever we have issues with the manholes themselves, older manholes, we're looking at lining them using a similar product to what we're looking at using for the pump station rehabs.
There you go. Come bearing gifts. There you go.
And also you said the city was paying for that, right?
Yes, it's part of, it's coming out of the dum-dum fund.
Andrew, you want to sit over here? No, I'm good. Yeah, I actually need to take off at like 4:30. I hope you guys are done.
We've gotten through.
We waited for you to come.
So that rounds out sewer, and then we go to wastewater treatment plant. And obviously, we got a lot of things going on wastewater treatment plant wise. The first one is the belt filter press. We've discussed this for a long time, but we've actually discussed with the county about accepting our liquid, which helps us tremendously in a couple different aspects. One is we're pumping a lot because we're wasting a decent amount. Our drying beds work, but obviously they're weather dependent. And so if we go through a rainy season, they don't work nearly as good. So we have to pump and we have to liquid haul out usually a couple different times through the week with CDI. With this proposal is we could switch because the county's dealing with our solid handlings. We could switch and have them haul our liquid, which helps us out for not having to have a belt filter press. It also eliminates the need to actually send it to CDI. So we're working through that.
What's the cost from them?
It's the same cost as what we're paying for solid handling.
It turns out that our cake is not dry enough, so they're having to re-dry it when they get it. So, you know, it's kind of Mox Nix for both sides.
So this has a potential of really helping us out. Yeah.
It's Jewish.
Close.
So I have it on as a placeholder, but we may be taking that one off. We've talked about the oxidation ditch lining. We're looking at the first ditch and seeing what the condition of it is, and then we can decide from there whether or not we're going to line both sides, one side. It'd be kind of a discovery. We haven't looked at those ditches since they were lined, I believe, in 2000, unless they've replaced one of the RAS.
We sealed the cracks, the current cracks, didn't we?
That's what we're working towards. So yeah. Infomark has a plan in place to go ahead and handle that when we finally get the quote and move forward on it.
Will anybody from our side be supervising that?
Yeah, we'll have, yeah.
Once it gets filled up, you know,
We'll take pictures.
you're done.
Yeah. Are you volunteering?
No, I will come.
Okay.
I'll bring some popsicle.
The electrical upgrades, obviously I put a placeholder in there just because of what happened with the Headworks feed back in November of 21. So as we work towards the future and we do our mega testing, whether or not we look at replacing the rest of the wastewater treatment plant, primary and secondary is going to be a discussion that we're going to have, obviously, once we get feedback from the testing that we have done.
And obviously, everything in this section is, you know, subject
Yes.
to our other decisions.
Correct. And
I
that's,
mean, this is kind of
yeah,
what we think is the minimum or the required, regardless of what option we go to. Some of it could probably be postponed, some of it may not.
yeah. And that kind of goes into like the control system upgrades, the UV upgrade, the blower upgrade, the RAS valve repair and piping. And the building upgrades are all ones that we sat down with Infomark and we went through annually, and Charlie was there, Robin was there, myself. And we discussed kind of the priority projects. Those are really the top priority projects. Obviously, the Headworks we're moving forward on. I believe we're going to be sending that off to DENREC today. Going up today. So we're working towards finalizing that project. Obviously, with these smaller projects, it all kind of plays into the general discussion of the Headworks. And then that leads into the EQ tank, the wastewater treatment plant, long-range planning. Obviously, the long-range planning has a cost allocated to it. We didn't put anything in because there wasn't really a decision that's made yet, but it's there. So there's going to be a cost associated with it. We have it there. And then,
Should we put something in, because we know that regardless, the next step, whatever option we choose is going to require a more detailed geotech, you know, whatever. Should we put a placeholder in for that portion of the funds?
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
Just
that is
depends.
that is a good idea.
just depends on how how much you want to put in there. Because again, what's going to end up happening is if playing this out, really option 2 or option 3, if a decision's made to follow in that direction, then some of the things that I have listed here that total over $1 million could be shifted away. So you're going to be shifting costs one way or another. I can throw a number in there, just a generic.
Right, but until we determine, I'm sorry, you know, until we determine, because even if option 2 or 3,
Mhm.
we have to determine the time frame, and we're still going to need to do some of these upgrades for reliability purposes of the plant till that point. Because I mean, we're talking 3 to 5 years.
I think it's, yeah, probably closer to 5 years, so.
So, and even if we go with option 1, there's still a set of geotech and other engineering to determine whether the berms, sheet piles, everything else, you know, could be supported out there.
The only thing is, I don't know if that's really going to hit capital. That's your only thing, because you're not going to depreciate a study. So then that kind of hits your O&M and your professional and contractual. That's the only thing you kind of,
That's true. I guess I was thinking of,
it's the same thing for us. We've discussed it, and we had the water assessment study on here, but realized that you're not depreciating the water assessment study, so it's really a professional contractual item.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
How
Yeah.
about a contingency?
We can put a contingency on, like, yeah, we put $5 million on, we can put $1 million on. It's really, it's kind of like what we're doing with all the projects up in water, because they may shift one way or another.
Oh, 2 questions. One is, I don't see headworks in here.
It's already funded. We're paying the interest on it.
Okay, all right.
So that's
I
done.
thought it was already in the budget, but I didn't know we had the money.
Yeah, it's a reimbursement, so we spend the money and then get reimbursed, but it's already been approved. We're going through that process.
And what capital would we need, improvements would we need to go with the county?
You would still probably do most of what's on here, other than the EQ tank, because you could get by without doing the EQ tank. Obviously, the bell filter press, and then the oxidation ditch lining is going to be dependent on the condition of the ditch itself. The electrical upgrades, as long as you don't show any sort of issues with the primary or the secondary, I don't see that being a
So
problem.
nothing big.
I mean, it's about $1 million when you
Well-
when you start looking at the bell filter press, the oxidation ditch, and
I
electrical upgrades.
would put at least the county in there. Any capital improvements for the county.
you wouldn't be doing it well. You'd be doing-
As if you made the decision to go with the county?
Yes, at least, I mean, as a start.
well, we've already got money in, because mostly it's pump stations, and we have to rebuild the pump
Well,
stations.
that was what I was thinking about. the
So
pump stations
we've
and
already got the pump station.
Okay, well then there
It's
isn't any.
What the final design is.
okay,
Um,
and that was my only thought.
But the
But
point is-
I think sometime over this year, we'll be spending money one way or the other. I just,
One,
I
one-
put
one
at
or
least
more.
$500,000 in there, I would suspect.
Right, but I think to Austin's point is, maybe that needs to go in the O&M budget versus the capital budget. Because any study would be a capital project.
We,
I-
but money's money, right, at some
Oh, yeah.
point. So,
correct, money is money.
Well, if you want to put it in the O&M, that'd be fine. I think we should have something in there because I just can't see us going through an entire year without not encumbering something.
That'll look even better.
Okay, we'll talk about that one. Stormwater, obviously, we still have the MS4. We always put a placeholder for MS4. We don't know when it's going to be designated. We have the vac truck, which is to have an additional vac truck. We use the shit, don't put that in the minutes, but we use the heck out of that. That vac truck, it gets used every single day. And we've talked about, we actually purchased a vac trailer thinking that we would use that in the smaller areas within town. We think we may end up trading the vac trailer in on another truck unit just because of how frequently we use that machine. It's currently being serviced now, but that's really probably one of the most priceless machines that we have. And we use that across all departments. So we split that with sewer as well. And then our normal pipe replacement, relining and catch basin replacement. The one thing that I will tell you, because I go against the grain and I have a great relationship with Del Dot, is that we're trying to designate what exactly the responsibility is with Del Dot right of ways, not only for roads, which is a discussion with the city, but also with the stormwater infrastructure underneath. So we have a meeting next month, and I think that's going to help us get a better understanding of who owns what, who maintains what, how to better budget, because a lot of this is through agreements that existed well before some people in this room and well before me. So
Keep bringing that age. thing up.
you're talking 19. I'm just saying.
Didn't we place an order
I'm getting old.
No, we placed an order for the line truck. Yeah, one of them we placed in 2022 for a 2024 delivery. One we placed in 2021 for a 2023 delivery. So they're about 2 years out. No idea what a vac truck is. I know what we paid for the last one, but I don't know what the lead time is. Moving to electric. So obviously we're gonna have this on the agenda for tomorrow. There has been some discussions recently within the federal government and through the Department of Energy on whether or not there would be some money out there for AMI projects. And so we've discussed this multiple times, and we're going to have another discussion this month. And as part of that discussion, one of the things that they're going to look for is if we do decide that this is something that we would entertain, they would need some sort of resolution, which Mike is looking at currently, or letter of commitment to see if they would help fund the project. And they're talking about funding about 50%. Now, whether that's 50% of the entire project or 50% of only the electric portion of the project, that's to be determined. But there's a significant cost. And if you look at it from that standpoint, it's between 300 and 800,000 that would be paid for by federal monies, which is a huge chunk. So we've had that in there. That could be a DMEC project. We can fund that through DMEC. The only one would be the water side. It wouldn't be funded through DMEC, but we have to have a decision because we visited Seaford, and Seaford was pretty upfront with how they felt about the AMI when it came to the electric portion. So we'll have to see how that plays out. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and then have a more in-depth conversation how we want to proceed. We've talked about vehicles. Same thing with vehicles. We're budgeting based off how we've depreciated. We've waited a long time on some of our line trucks. So we have a bucket truck on order and a line truck on order. We suspect one of them to come in this year, hopefully. The other one, probably a 2024 delivery. That's fingers crossed though. And then a couple of undergrounding projects, older undergrounding that we're looking at tackling. Jefferson and Bay Breeze are the two big ones, but we're also taking a look at the project with Del Dot to see if what we do today will be impacted by what's going to come in the future, because we don't want to do it twice.
What all is being undergrounded?
We're replacing all the undergrounding in both the Jefferson and Bay Breeze development, new conduit, and I think it was all direct buried back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're looking at putting conduit and primary in. It's all undergrounded currently, but we're looking at replacing all of it.
I guess I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And then same thing with Pilottown Village, but these are smaller projects. And we're gonna play out to see how. I'm gonna sit down with Rhett and see which ones really take priority so we can space them out. Because obviously we kind of get thin when you look at our capital budgets in 2026 and 2027. So whether or not some of those could be pushed. And then
So,
substation.
excuse me, down Jefferson, does that go all the way from Kings Highway
Yes,
underground now?
yes, I'm almost positive.
Oh, okay. I knew the end would be the new stuff, but I didn't realize.
Thinking about Jefferson Avenue, I think it's Jefferson.
Yeah, this is Jefferson Apartments, not Jefferson Ave.
Oh, okay, yeah. That really had me
Good
confused.
catch,
Thanks.
Charlie.
Yeah.
The other Jefferson.
Yeah.
Junior.
Yeah. So the substation improvements and the transformer at Schley, they kind of play into each other. So we talked about substation improvements from not only the fencing, the security upgrades, also we do our normal annual and biannual testing of our transformers, both at Schley Avenue and also throughout the entire town, because we don't have AMI, so we can't regularly see. So we do our infrared testing and so forth. We just did our substation testing on the transformers. We got the oil testing done. Everything looks good. There's some odds and ends that we're going to replace bushing wise.
Recent?
We got it done last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
That one I saw.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know if you meant that they got done again.
No. I think we do it every 2 or 3 years when it comes to those. But then we also have to be mindful of, and we had a meeting up at DMEC where we had the state police terrorism group come down and have a discussion. And because of political reasons and the individuals that live near us, obviously the president of the United States, there have been threats made on the black market or the dark web into this area and how easy it would be to take down the entire grid. With transformers like we have down there at a 1 to 2 year lead time, we want to be mindful because that's not a good situation. But we've also discussed, that's not to say that somebody goes over to Delmarva Power and shoots their transformer and then we go black. So there's a couple different things to keep in mind, and we've discussed that from a DMEC level and obviously from a BPW level. So we started putting money in there, or allocation wise, for replacement of the transformer. I'll tell you that the reports that have come back seem to be very favorable with the transformer condition, other than the minor servicing that we're doing. And then the last one was actually at the drawbridge. There's an overhead pole that goes across from pump station 4, hits the property, which is owned by Dickie Bryan or Richard Bryan, and then comes back down. And we're discussing taking that completely offline because of where the pole is. The pole's not in good condition. It's a redundancy piece, and we're looking at adding a redundancy piece in a different area that provides the same service, but from an underground perspective instead of an overhead. And because we were trying to coordinate that with Canal Crossing, it's tight. It's very, very tight. And you really don't have a good place to set up and directionally drill. And so we're looking at alternatives instead of doing it at that location.
What's
we just go back
expensive
to the
about
truck.
taking things down? I mean, that's, what goes into that, the decommissioning?
So I've already talked to the property owner about this, but what we were going to do is we were going to have a company come in and actually take the entire, all it is a piece of overhead that spans from where the pump station is over to the other side, and then
Right.
it kind of cuts over and comes across. It's not a big deal, but we don't have the equipment to necessarily take it down. So we've discussed having a contractor come in and decommission it.
That just sounds expensive. I have no idea, but
We're actively seeking a price range to kind of gauge it. So it'd be
Okay.
interesting. I threw a number out there just because I didn't think it would be terribly expensive. And I talked with the property owner about, giving us access to that area should we need additional. And it didn't seem like it was going to be a problem. So
okay.
Yeah, just to back up, we also said about the transformers. If you remember 3 or 4 years ago, we had some kind of alarming oil results. But they found that there was some connections inside the transformer that were creating arcing, causing the settling and such. Since then, it's been monitored, and I think the transformers are actually in pretty good shape. It's really more about capacity going forward than it is about.
And if you order it, like, for example, if you order in 27, 28, you may take delivery in 2030. Because there's a couple DMAC members that are doing some substation work, and a couple of them are ordering material today for a project 2 years from now. Just because that's the way of the land when it comes to electric infrastructure. Moving on to support or admin activities. So we have our normal building improvements. So this comes down to replacement of doors. So one of the areas that we're just talking about is down where our pole buildings are off of Schley, where all those doors were original to the building. They were all rotten out. The frames are rotten out. So we're looking at having those replaced. Some of the roofs, like the substation building roof, we're looking at having that replaced. It's just an old one that's leaking in the corner. We expanded the garage door. Obviously, Tom sees it every single time he drives by. That's been a 2-year project to get a contractor out here to do that. So odds and ends just at our building locations that we're looking at doing. I have the Army Reserve building in there just because I don't know what to allocate to it. I basically said Army Reserve building or BPW office building, whichever one kind of works out. And then obviously we have security measures. And then the rest are from Josh's. So Itron, which is the handheld for meter reading, and the GIS Trimble unit and the server and computer upgrades.
So there are some pretty big unknowns. When are you guys thinking the Army Reserve will come into play as far as cash out?
I mean, years. For those bursts of remediation, we haven't even taken delivery of it. So we're not putting anything much into our budget. It should be on potential studies.
So the last time I talked to anyone, do we even have the process for the transfer yet?
That's what I mean.
No, I mean, it's,
We're certainly not doing anything on in this year's budget in terms of anything meaningful. I mean, the one thing I think we definitely built into the budget is maintenance, frankly, because if we take it over, then you'd have to cut the grass and all those other things. Maybe, you know. But yeah, it's unknown. Hey, I'd say we're safe with this.
But we were talking today about our planning and how good our planning is over 5 years. You had done some research on how often we actually have to do it. Because around here, we are really bad when you're looking 5 years out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things that aren't in here that it's just hard, it's hard to manage.
So it's best practice to do 5 years, but it's not required. That if we wanted to slim it down to 3 years, that's acceptable.
And the only thing I was thinking about that is if you had 3 years that were tight and 2 years that were aspirational, it might give us more understanding what we're actually involved in or not involved in.
Well, and it's gonna, I mean, at the end of the day, we're gonna have to address the cash reserve policy no matter what, not only because you're below your minimum cash reserve policy, but also tomorrow, we're gonna have a discussion about pollution insurance. And pollution insurance right now is $1 million self-insured. And we have the ability to take a policy out with a couple of different options. And one of those options is to insure the wastewater treatment plant and all the pump stations. And that comes at a cost of $10,000 a year. So do you look at $10,000 a year as with an insurance policy in which you would include that in your deductibles, or do you self-insure yourself for $1 million? And if we go with the latter, or with the option of taking an insurance policy out, then we obviously have to change our cash reserve policy because we don't have to self-insure for $1 million anymore. So just to keep everybody's minds in kind of working towards that direction, we'll probably need to look at some of these policies that exist today and modify them as, you know, if we're changing up to a 3-year or we're changing the percentages of how everything's allocated within that cash reserve policy. We're gonna have to take a look at it anyway.
We technically have 5 years though, once we're under the policy to get back to the policy, I believe.
Yes.
And it's something we need to effort.
Yeah, and that's, you know, we implemented the 5 years of rate increases and they're going to be compounded. So as you get into year 3, 4, and 5, you'll start to see more of those results. But then again, it's also tied back into if your costs for materials are going up, your costs for operations and maintenance, contractual costs are going up. It all plays a factor in where that's taken from.
And then the other decisions around the wastewater treatment plant, et cetera, et cetera.
Because that changes up the entire O&M from if you move to a solution that is different from your existing, meaning moving away from a membrane filtration plant, your operations and maintenance costs go drastically down, but then you also have the debt service associated with it. Yeah. Or you can just hit them with, anybody have any questions?
What are we looking at?
The O&M.
I would.
Please go through everything with breakthrough.
Okay. Line 1.
RESID.
So for all of the revenues, we are looking at averages now, a minimum of 2 years. Most of them are 3 years, with exception to stormwater. And then we are including our increase that we set last year.
For the next 5 years.
Yes. And residential, we gave a small growth to that with the developments coming in.
Again, a lot of that's supply chain driven because what we predicted the growth to be last year wasn't what we saw. And a lot of that wasn't dependent upon actual homes being built. It was dependent upon the supply being built.
Am I looking at the right thing?
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
and then, and then these are the notes that go
Oh,
with it.
okay.
So on the revenue,
Yeah.
what's driving the industrial on the electric? That's
The PCA,
What's that?
the PCA. So I'm taking the 3-year average and then a 2.5% increase, and then a PCA, an average PCA of 0.008.
So less than a penny. Remember, in the past, it's been a credit, so.
Right, no, I understand. It's just that it's so much larger percent increase than residential, commercial, industrial.
So last fiscal year, electric for industrial was high. So that's coming into this average as well. Now, if you think that's a fluke, I can take that out and we can recalculate it, but
We don't really
Yeah.
see from an industrial standpoint, because SPI, obviously, we had a discussion with SPI. They see a compound or a growth over the next 5 years and then an additional growth beyond that. So using that as your benchmark, because they're a big proponent, obviously BB, as far as we know, they're not going anywhere. From an industrial standpoint, don't see too much of a shift, at least on the electric side.
and
On the others on revenue.
yep, I was just about to go into it.
Okay,
For the others, we have the Lewes Waterfront Preserve payment coming in
For the electric.
for
Each one.
electric, water, and wastewater. That was originally budgeted for this year, but with Tower Hill pushing out, that we won't get that payment for this fiscal year. It'll be next fiscal year.
but is that the impact fee?
Nope, that's their portion of the off-site improvement cost. So Tower,
okay.
yeah.
And that's why I was getting confused. there, 'cause I
Minus
saw
what
the
we have
impact
to
fee
pay.
down below.
yeah, we pay first and then we bill Lewes Waterfront Preserve.
For expenses, we're taking into account the CPIU. We're using a lot of the numbers from either this current year that we're in or the last 2 years because of the price increases.
Like the CPIU, what's the difference between that and, I know it's urban, what's the?
Utilities. Oh, I don't know what the actual percentage.
We kept it at CPI. We kept it at just CPIU.
I'm happy
But-
with that, I was curious.
I think utility is a little bit more conservative, but I will tell you that the biggest thing when it comes to expenses on the electric side is just the impact from Indian River and then the impact of the increase from normal power supply increase. And that's, you're pushing 13%, nearly 13%, so. And that's over the course of a year. If you spread that out, it's even greater.
And also I have the end of year fleet entry in parentheses here. In the current budget, I did forget to include that. So our numbers for other professional or other supplies and expenses. For when you see that raised 21%, 100%, it's the entry for fleet.
What's the driver on the salary, wage and benefits? It's 19%. Is that head or is that?
That's an additional employee in electric. You only have 3 linemen and 1 hopefully soon to be linemen in the coming years. But George is getting ready to retire. So it's that delta between George getting ready to retire and hiring another individual. So for the first year or two, you're going to be bridging it. And then obviously after that, George would then retire, and then we would have that person step in and fill in that gap.
And then water, wastewater, and stormwater are all increasing as well with a full year of an additional employee this year.
Which is, we hired them this fiscal year, but accounting for them next fiscal year.
You count training into that as well, professional and contractual services in any way, or?
Training is
Training.
actually an admin.
It would be in salaries, wages, benefits.
Thank you.
And other supplies on the electric side.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, yeah.
What's the, I mean,
Isn't that what you just said, the fleet entry?
well, actually, both electric
Yeah.
and water, it's increased threefold.
Yeah, it's the fleet entry. We move
Oh.
everything off of that account
Oh,
to clear it.
Which account was that?
So it's actually it's showing under administrative, so it gets deducted from there and goes to other supplies and expenses to the correct entity, utility,
From admin to where?
to other supplies and
Okay.
expenses.
hmm.
And depreciation amortization is actually changing from when I did this, because we changed the capital budget one more time. So that'll be updates on the next one. It's about 12,000 of an increase for electric, 5,000 for water.
But this depreciation amortization is
Yep.
based on this current capital.
Yes,
What Kim's saying is she'll kill me if I change it again.
yeah. Which he's going to.
Yeah.
So there might be a death in our work family.
Well, that would increase our salaries and
Yeah, with a lawsuit, it's gonna be a mess.
How about changing the percentage on the last line item?
Which one?
Fund the last line item.
In lieu of franchise.
We're at 5% of monthly billed revenue.
And obviously, as our as we increase revenue, that number then increases. It's 5% of gross.
For non-operational, I stuck with interest income from this current fiscal year.
That's not very optimistic.
The interest expense are your loans.
5%. Just, okay, I didn't.
Interest expense is from your loans.
Mhm.
The impact fees, all we did was half of Lewes Waterfront Preserve,
But it's very conservative.
because we know for sure they should be coming online this year.
Their transformer is supposed to be delivered, I believe, in May.
Yeah.
I don't foresee them taking too much time to get them installed, getting everything approved, and building permits and built and so forth. But we only included them, even though we have several other projects, White's Pond, and there's no builder tie in there, so that's gonna be open. Lodge Historic Blue, or no, Lodge Paid, Dutchman's Harvest is in there. Donovan Smith, technically, I'm guessing we probably would use that as probably one of the last disbursements right before they come online. We would submit that to the state for reimbursement. So we didn't include those because we were being conservative, because last year we thought it was going to be much different, and that wasn't the case, just because of supply chain.
Should we make any changes to our policies for some of those things? Tighten things up a little bit?
in what way?
Concerning what?
I think the biggest thing from a policy standpoint is something totally different, but it would be related to like fees that when builder pay their fees when it comes to inspection and all that stuff, paying it ahead of time or
As opposed to holding out, not paying it. Might be something to consider drafting something on.
Yeah.
Review.
I have an email from Mike Hoffman from August that talks about a policy discussion in general again. And that ties in the electric tariff, because we talked about updating the electric tariff as well.
And just an overall view. The electric looks healthy. Water looks healthy, even though we are at a reduction. Wastewater, the bottom line does look healthy, but that's because we're counting that 900,000. If you actually look at operating income, we're at a very large loss. And we would have been last year if we weren't getting $1 million from developers. So that trend's continuing. And stormwater, we're actually gonna start making some money. So that's exciting. Yeah. And the change in assets will be about 300,000 more than our principal payments. So that's all that would be left to be invested in capital.
You're not very optimistic for change in market value.
I did not project.
So the Dow is down 1.9%. It just popped up on my computer.
Hope your ideas are wrong, brother, which I get the idea of being conservative.
But UBS talked about coming in and having a discussion about changing some things up in account as well.
You can put it all in treasury bonds and get 5%.
On the wastewater, total operating expenses of 4.5 million.
Mhm.
Now mine,
That's just for this current, it's for the tomorrow's fiscal year.
Yes, starting in April.
And does that have money in it for the unknowns of the plant?
No. So what we were talking about earlier on the capital,
But it has-
adding that O and
but
M.
it includes the knowns that we have for the plant.
Yes.
Well, everything on paper looks good. Not everything, but the bottom line anyhow is not bad.
Moving on to cash reserves. Yeah. So our cash reserve policy is 25% of the expenses of the operations and maintenance budget. 2% of our historical cost of assets. So that's like accounting for depreciation. Our current year of capital improvements and our 5-year. So we're counting the first year twice. Our customer deposits, which can be refundable at any time if the customer leaves us, so we need to keep that, all of that. And our self-insurance, which we'll have a discussion tomorrow. That may be changing.
What's the 900,000 for stormwater self-insurance? Is that hasn't been
it's
discussed?
pollution.
Pollution
Yeah,
insurance.
pollution and flood. They give about $1 million each. One has a
Yeah,
million. One
Sewer
has-
and stormwater is holding the bulk of the
Right, it's like
insurance.
$1 million each.
Yeah, 1 million's for pollution, 1 million's for flood.
And the pollution
Is one of those.
is one of them that we
Yeah.
are considering. And the flood, the initial feedback was it's incredibly expensive.
Yeah, it's a lot, especially now. how-
Where we are here, you're not going to be able to afford flood. So tell me why we count it twice. Tell me what the purpose is.
Damn insurance people, oh, sorry.
No, no,
To
no,
me-
I'm going back. I'm
No,
going
we're
back
still
to,
gonna have a capital budget.
To me,
capital.
it's because it's the most certain, so we'll count it twice. And then after that, we're only gonna count it a 15% because we don't really know what's gonna happen after the first year. That's my reasoning to it.
so you would be, you would like to keep it counted twice.
Well, there's different ways of doing it. We can go, the first year is 30%, the second year is 20%, the third year is 15%, fifth year, 10%. You know, down the line.
I see what you're backloading the first year,
Yes.
just in case.
Those hopefully will be happening.
Most likely.
But we're counting 100% of the capital expenditures, right?
15% on here.
15%, okay.
Yes.
So you're, okay, now, you're-
And I took out the projects that I'm pretty positive that will be funding, which is AMI for electric and the transformers at Schley. For water, it'll be the water tower, the canal crossing at the bridge, and the water treatment building.
How did you count the AMI? It was 850,000 times two,
Yeah, 1.73 total,
because we should get some of that back, right?
which again, we wouldn't be paying for it. So it'll be a reduction, whether it's through financing or grants.
yeah, I think cover that tomorrow with the meeting, so.
And then for the
Very concerned.
And then for the sewer, 1.5 million for the lift station upgrades between grants, ARPA and financing. And 650,000 for the EQ tank, which depending on what we pick for the long term, might not even be needed. So once you calculate all that up, we're showing almost 3.2 million short. We do have the,
So it says the capital reserve policy shall include 15% of the current year capital improvement.
Mhm.
And the next one is the cash reserve policy shall include 50% of the 5-year. 5-year, I certain, does that include the first year as well? Do it double counts the first?
Yeah, that's where the double counting.
that's how I interpret it.
I. And well. I'm not sure that's necessary, but that's okay.
And we do have a $3 million line of credit. I don't know where that comes into play here.
According to the policy, it doesn't.
Yes, if we change the policy and show that 3 million, that we're only $200,000 short, or do we not show it because that's supposed to be used for, it's not supposed to be used as a
Having borrowed money,
normal
That would be creative.
funding. Yes, yes.
To use it, you mean?
Or I'm gonna borrow money, therefore I have money. I either have it or I don't. If I borrow it, it comes at a cost.
Well, if you buy insurance, you're down to 1.2. I mean, 2.2.
Well, and just keep in the back of your mind, that one of the beauties with the line of credit is that you can use it to originally to fund something that wasn't really predicted if it was an expense, but then you could term it out. Should you wish to term it out, it's another avenue, because then you're counterbalancing the fact that, do you gain anything by saying we're going to go get a low interest loan through SRF and then pay the 15% or 20% to get prevailing wages? Or do you go and you use a line of credit and then term out the line of credit?
What's the interest rate on, how does the interest rate get factored on?
Forgot to look. It's so for, I want to say it's +2, but I'm not positive.
You going with the under or the over?
I'm just going with math matters. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know.
Correct. And we started to take a look at that, comparing what projects make sense to utilize that, what doesn't.
Well, because if you pick a year one capital project and you pay for your line of credit, you would take 30% off up here. So 30%, for argument's sake, $3 million, you take $1 million out of your required reserves.
And you don't necessarily, like if you're doing a $2 million project,
It would go into operations.
I may not understand what you said, but are you saying that because I borrowed money, I can take it out of the fact that it's not written that way in the reserve policy?
No, what I'm saying is the reserve policy says that you have to take into account 15% twice
Yes.
for capital projects. So if I've paid for those either through SRF loans or through another means, they're no longer in the capital budget, right?
If
You
you,
no longer need to use the reserve to fund it.
I'm not trying to.
because
I'm
you're
not
still
trying
counting.
No, but it makes
Yeah.
sense. No, if you paid for it already, you don't need it in the reserve.
But if you're paying for it and you borrowed money to pay for it,
Then it should show
Well,
up on
that
the,
goes out, the borrowing part goes elsewhere.
it comes up on the O and M to show the principal
you can do
payments.
math any way you want. Borrowing money costs you money.
I understand. My point
No
is that a
arguing that.
reserve, the reserve fund, if you're not using it, but you, for something, you see what I'm saying? If you've paid for a project or you borrowed money to pay for it, the borrowing part goes elsewhere. The reserve fund that's needed by our policies then should not include that.
You have to include it in your operation.
Then, yeah, it's
Yeah.
included elsewhere, is all I'm saying, yeah. So you don't need to, the reserve fund then doesn't need to be, whatever that amount was can come out of the reserve fund.
Didn't you already do that, Kim, on
Yeah,
some of the?
yes.
But what I would say, is you need to take a deep dive into your policy.
Yeah,
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, you can't,
Honestly, you
I
gotta take a look,
guarantee none of us do our household, how you just said.
but you have,
Yeah.
Well,
but you have reserve, you have both reserve policy and then you have the investment
Yes.
policy, and they're both tied together and they both need to be adjusted and looked at periodically.
If I replace the roof on my house and the house is, and I borrowed money,
Mhm.
I don't have to bother to continue to collect. I start collecting over for the next 20 years when I have to replace it again. But I don't have to replace it tomorrow.
You should work at G Capital.
No, I should not. You guys did funny things.
Well, and I know what funny looks like when I hear it, and this would be a funny.
All right.
but
but
why
we
wouldn't
can put that
it,
off.
why
We're
wouldn't
not
it
doing
change
that.
the reserve policy? I mean, not the policy, but the reserve amount. If you've used the money already in terms of borrowing, and it goes into another account, it's actually in another account.
And just because it's in another account doesn't mean you don't owe money.
No, I
Yeah.
understand.
And it comes at a carried interest rate. You need to blend these things together and make a rational decision. I'm not saying that policy is right. We technically have 5 years to fix where we are now financially, but borrowing money to fix it, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
If you have reserve for $1 million, but you borrow money for $1 million for a project, it goes into a different account, but it doesn't go in as $1 million. It goes in as whatever per year.
At
And
a
then,
carried
so
interest rate, absolutely.
if you pay, I don't know, pick a number, $30,000 a year, then,
It's an amortization.
yeah, then you don't need the $1 million in reserve for that project.
We need to look at the math holistically.
Okay.
If we're gonna put another factor in the reserve policy, we need to take it into consideration in a broader sense. That's
No,
all.
I agree.
I'm
No, I'm
I'm not
not.
saying it can't go from here to there.
Yeah,
I'm just saying there's a shift of balance when you do that.
I agree.
Fine, but you need to
Yeah.
make sure the math works.
Yeah, I know. I'm wondering, I'm just saying, and relative to the reserve policy, we really need to look at it. So those fluctuations can be accounted for in
I
the
don't-
cash
I don't
flow.
disagree with, I don't disagree.
I mean,
with
in
what you're
the,
saying. That's-
cash reserves rather.
No one is proposing that we don't need to run the business fiscally sound. But the reason why you have a capital budget, an O&M budget, reserve budget are for different reasons.
Okay, so we're $3.2 million over right now. That's the point.
I think we should really look at it like 2.2.
Okay, now you're 2.2 million.
Because we're gonna
And
buy
you owe
insurance.
someone else money.
No, we're gonna
No,
buy
for the
insurance.
Insurance.
Mhm.
Well, the deductible would be included on there.
Okay, there's no free lunch, right?
I understand, but the cost of insurance is then whatever it is.
10,000, 14,000,
I
whatever.
get it, and it should go into the math, but it's not like we just gotta bring everything together. If we're gonna change the policy with insurance,
Mhm.
with loans and all that credit stuff, that's
Mhm.
fine. It just needs to holistically work.
Yeah, I agree. No, I'm not against that. I'm for it.
So that rounds out the budget discussion.
And then,
And I would encourage, should you guys have any questions, I'm gonna work with Charlie on the capital things, button up on the water specifically. If you guys have any questions between now and when we present it again in March, in March, I would encourage you guys to come in. It's a lot of information. It always is.
Tell me what that is.
That's for tomorrow's. discussion.
Okay,
That's
all
not
right.
for today.
You're gonna tell me tomorrow.
Yeah.
It'll be a
Charlie's
surprise.
gonna tell you. We got,
Well, thank you. You have a good job.
so. Next is executive session.
Yeah, I'm just texting Mike here.
What time was it?
So,
Austin and Kim, great job. Thank you. Well done.
Yes.
Well explained. Very good.
I gotta figure out how I'm gonna do this, because I gotta get press. I'm gonna have to send press a separate email.
Mhm.
How the hell am I gonna bring it up on that? If it's Microsoft Teams, how am I gonna bring it up on there?
Just like you normally do.
So I don't use Zoom in this capacity.
You mean you don't use Teams in that capacity?
Yeah,
Correct.
okay. Press, I'm gonna send you a separate link for the executive session.
Did you send with Mike already?
I didn't.
Okay.
I'm gonna send one.
I just texted him, we'll see.
we actually had another person on the line. We should have asked if any questions. I didn't think
Yeah, have an
Who else is on
adjournment.
one?
Let's see.
of people on it. No, excuse me. There was one person not.
There's nobody there now.
I
I
understand.
think it might have been you.
Yes.
Those three were included. There was another person.
Oh, okay.
Austin, you're not bringing it up on the screen then.
No, I am gonna bring you up on the screen, but I'm gonna send you a separate invite.
Can I have a motion?
Oh, a separate invite.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you a Teams invite.
So I'm going out of this.
Motion to get out.
Yeah, log out of that one. I'm gonna send you one in the next.
Okay, I moved to get out. You moved, and you second. All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye.
All right.
Who was the motion? Oh.
I'm surprised West Rush wasn't here.
So